The billionaire let the woman he loved walk away, because sometimes love becomes too painful to hold on to. So he convinced himself letting her go was the right thing. But by the time the truth finally reached him, she was already boarding a flight out of his life, and this time, he wasn't going to lose her quietly. He was in hospital socks. No shoes, no wallet. One hand pressed against the wound in his side that the doctors had told him, less than 6 hours ago, would need at least 3 weeks of complete rest to heal properly. He didn't care about any of that. He cared about the departures board, about the reason behind her flight that had just changed, and the distance between him and the security line he could not cross without a ticket. He cared about her. And so he ran. To understand how a man ends up bleeding through a hospital gown in the middle of an airport terminal, you have to go back to a woman named Celine Vaughn and a man named Dorian Lennox, and a love that was never given the right conditions to survive. They were young when it started. Dorian was the kind of man his family had plans for. And Celine was brilliant, magnetic, and from exactly the kind of background that those same people considered a liability. It should have been impossible. Instead, it was inevitable. They loved each other completely, recklessly, without a contingency plan. But the world Dorian had been born into does not accommodate people like Celine. And rather than watch him be slowly suffocated by a life that had no room for her, Celine made a decision. She left. She packed while he was away, and when he returned there was nothing. Not a note, not a message, just the absence of her. Dorian mourned her by becoming very, very good at his work. He accepted the life his family had built for him. He married a woman named Renata through an arrangement that had more to do with strategy than feeling, and he told himself that stability was a reasonable substitute for happiness. He was wrong. Renata was not a simple woman. She was charming in company and unpredictable behind closed doors. Before the marriage, there had been whispers, things Dorian chose not to investigate, because he was exhausted from feeling too much and thought ignorance was the same as peace. They had a son, Cairo. From the beginning, something in Dorian resisted full surrender to the boy. The child was entirely innocent, but there was an arithmetic about his birth that Dorian had worked out very early and never spoken aloud. He raised him. He provided everything a son could need, but he kept some part of himself from him. Then Celine, his first and only love, died. And Dorian grieved quietly. He had never fully known her, and now the window had closed. Then came the rumor. Renata had had a daughter, but she never married, a girl who had never been claimed, never introduced, just existing somewhere in the world, uncollected. That detail lodged in Dorian Lennox like a splinter. He could not explain why it wouldn't leave him. He only knew that it didn't. And so, quietly, without telling anyone, he began to look. Cairo Lennox was 29 years old when he sat in a conference room with a candidate file open in front of him. A department head's role needed to be filled. He had done it before. He was always correct. Then Ariel Hayes walked in. She was not loud about it. Her presence, her beauty. She didn't announce them. She simply looked at him directly. Cairo forgot the first question he was supposed to ask. He looked down at his notepad to recover himself. When he looked back up, she was still watching him patiently, as though she was used to people needing a moment. The interview ran 12 minutes longer than scheduled. He hired her. His report to the department said she was the strongest candidate by a significant margin. That was true. But it was not the complete truth. It didn't announce itself, the thing that was building between them. First, it was small. He found reasons to walk past her workstation. She found reasons to look up when she heard his voice in the corridor. They were both too intelligent not to notice what they were doing. They were both too far gone to stop. It rained on a Thursday. They were pressed back under the awning of a corner cafe. She'd wanted tea. He'd offered to walk with her on his break, which was not something he did with anyone else, when the sky opened up without warning. They both laughed at the timing, and when the laughter settled, Cairo said something he had not planned to say. "I keep looking for reasons to be wherever you are," he said. "And I think you already know that." Ariel didn't answer immediately. She watched the rain coming down beyond the awning, then quietly, "I know. I do the same thing." No grand gesture, just two people telling each other the truth. When the rain stopped, they walked back to the building side by side, and everything between them was different now, and they both knew it. What neither of them knew, what no one in the building knew, was that Dorian Lennox had been searching for Ariel Hayes for 3 years. Not openly. He was far too careful for that. He knew what Renata was capable of. If Celine found the girl first, she would remove her with the particular efficiency of a woman who had spent decades treating problems as logistics. So Dorian searched in the dark. A private investigator rooted through a third-party firm, careful monitoring through proxies. He found her. And then, of all the impossible geometries of a wide world, he found her inside his own company. Already hired. Already performing at a level that made her impossible to ignore. Already, and this was the part that stopped him completely, already in his son's orbit. He stood in his office doorway and looked at her across the open floor. He looked like a man who had been holding his breath for 3 years and had just, very quietly, exhaled. Then the reality of what he was seeing settled over him, and the breath he had just released caught again. He needed to secure her legacy first, so she can't be easily removed. So he moved quickly, and within 8 weeks, Ariel was promoted to head of her department. The decision was, on paper, completely defensible. Her leadership was evident to anyone paying attention. But the pace was too fast for the culture of the company. People notice. They always notice. The whispers traveled. They always do. They reached Renata through the network she had maintained carefully for years. Board members who owed her considerations. Assistants who still returned her calls. A name arrived in her ear. Ariel Hayes. Celine pulled the file. She looked at the background. She looked at the dates. She sat very still for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. She came to his office unannounced. She closed the door behind her without asking permission, and sat in the chair across from his desk without being invited to. Both of these things communicating something precise about where she believed the power was. She placed one hand flat on the desk, not aggressive, deliberate. "Who is Ariel Hayes to you?" Dorian looked at her for a long time. Then, "That isn't a conversation we're having. You are transferring authority to her, restructuring around her, making her untouchable inside your own company." Her voice was controlled, precisely controlled, in the way of someone who has rehearsed the control. "So yes, Dorian, we are having this conversation." The room went quiet. Dorian stood. He walked to the window. He was choosing his words carefully. He turned back. "Before you say anything further," he said very calmly, "you should be careful, because I have been aware for quite some time that Cairo is not my son." The air went out of the room. Celine's composure, the thing she had built and polished and relied on through every difficult year, cracked, not in anger, in terror. The hand on his desk trembled once before she pulled it back. "Dorian." Her voice had changed. Gone was the precision, the rehearsal. What was underneath it was something older and more honest. "He doesn't know anything. He is innocent in all of this. Whatever you feel about me, I'm asking you." please." It was the most genuine thing she had ever said to him. Dorian left the office without answering, because he had nothing left he wanted to say, and he needed to get out of the room before she saw that the moment had cost him something too, had cracked something in him that he had spent years keeping sealed. Caro proposed on a Sunday morning. It was not planned. There was no ring yet, no speech prepared. He was sitting at her kitchen table pretending to look at his phone while she moved quietly around making breakfast, and he watched her and felt something settle in him. He put the phone down. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life finding reasons to be near you," he said. "I just want to be near you." She turned from the counter, a spatula still in her hand. She looked at him the way people look at things they've wanted for a long time and weren't sure they were allowed to have. "Caro, I know it's not a speech. I don't have a ring yet. I needed you to know that I'm decided. I've been decided for a while now." She crossed the kitchen. She sat down across from him and took his hand in both of hers, and she looked at him, and she said yes. Not dramatically, just yes. Obviously yes. He laughed. She laughed. He pulled her into him and they stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in the warmth of a future they believed, completely and without question, that they were building toward. They had no idea what was coming. And watching them, in the warm light of that kitchen, in the simplicity of that yes, that is the part that makes what comes next almost impossible to bear. Caro didn't bring her to meet his father. He went alone first. He was always like that, thoughtful, careful, the kind of man who prepares the room before walking someone he loves into it. He sat across from Dorian in the sitting room of the house he had grown up in and began, carefully, "I need to talk to you about someone I want to spend my life with." Dorian listened. He was a man practiced at stillness. Caro described her. The way she made him feel like the most complete version of himself. He was more articulate about loving her than he had ever been articulate about anything in his life. Dorian listened to all of it. Then, "What is her name?" "Ariel Hayes." The room changed. Dorian was quiet for so long that Caro leaned forward. "Dad, this is not possible, Caro." "What does that mean? You haven't even—" "She is your sister." 3 words. And the universe reorganized itself around them. Caro didn't speak. He couldn't. He sat very still, and something behind his eyes went somewhere private and unreachable, somewhere no one else could follow. He shook his head once. Not in anger. Not yet. In the physical refusal of a body that has just received information it cannot process. But Dorian's face did not change, and that stillness, that terrible, absolute stillness, was its own answer. There was nothing left to say. Caro stood. He left the house. He drove without knowing where he was going, and then he found he was going to the one place he had always gone, when he needed the world to make sense again. He went to his mother. He walked into Renata's house the way he always had, without knocking, the way children do with parents, regardless of how old they become. She was in the sitting room, and she read his face the moment he appeared in the doorway. "He told you," she said. "Who is she? Is it true?" And here is the moment everything hinged on. Here is the moment Renata could have chosen a different path. She could have grieved with her son. She could have told him the truth of her own failures, held him through the shock, been the mother he had come here looking for. Instead, something older took over. Something that had kept her safe for so long, it had become indistinguishable from instinct. "That girl means nothing, Caro." Her voice was sharp. "Your father is trying to give her what is yours. Your inheritance, your position, everything you have worked for. You are not going to let him. She is a problem, and problems get resolved. A pause, and then, almost gently, in a tone that was somehow worse than everything before it, I've already arranged it. She won't be in your way much longer. Cairo went cold. What does that mean? Not a question. A sentence with no room left in it. What did you arrange? Celine waved her hand, that familiar, dismissive gesture he had watched her make his entire life when she considered a matter settled. It's handled, Cairo. Let it. What did you do? She blinked. The volume from him was something she had never heard before. He was on his feet now, and his hands were shaking, and she looked at him and saw someone she did not recognize. She is to disappear, Celine said, and her voice was quieter now, but the words were somehow worse for the quietness. Today, the arrangement is already. He was already moving. He didn't hear the rest of the sentence. He was through the door and down the steps and in his car, and his hands were shaking so badly he dropped his phone twice before he got the call to connect. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 3rd ring, she picked up. The sound of her voice, ordinary, unsuspecting, completely unaware, did something to his chest that he didn't have a word for. Hey, where are you right now? Exactly where you are. Something in his voice stopped her. She was listening to him differently now. She told him the street, a neighborhood she'd mentioned once when she talked about evening walks, the route she took when she needed air. Stay exactly where you are, he said. Don't move, I'm coming. Cairo? Please, just stay there amidst crowd. Please. He drove the way people drive when they understand exactly what is at stake. Every red light felt personal. He got there. He saw her first, standing on the pavement where he'd asked her to stay, her phone in her hand, looking in the direction she expected him to arrive from. She was unharmed, and the sight of her standing there whole and safe was the single greatest relief of his life. And then he saw the car. It had been trailing her slowly along the road. As he pulled up, he saw the window beginning to lower on the passenger side, and he understood what he was looking at. He didn't think. He has never been a man who didn't think. But there was no thinking in this. There was only her, his legs already moving before his mind had finished forming the decision. He crossed the distance. He stepped in front of her. The sound was small and sharp and final. And then Cairo was on the ground, and Ariel was screaming his name, and somewhere in the distance the car was already gone. She held his face in her hands right there on the pavement. Look at me, she said. Keep looking at me. Stay with me. He looked at her, then closed his eyes. When Renata received the call, she was still in her sitting room. She had not moved since he left. She was told her son was in surgery, and she ran. She came in fast, her composure already failing, her eyes scanning the ward until they landed on Ariel. And something about the sight of this woman broke whatever was left of her self-possession. She sat down beside Ariel and she talked, not strategically, not carefully. The way people talk when the fear of losing their child overrides every other instinct they have ever had. She said what she had done, and why. She said who Ariel was. She said the word that Ariel had not heard yet, and the word landed in that waiting room like a stone into still water. Sister. And the circles it made did not stop. Ariel sat with it. She did not fall apart. By the time the officers arrived and walked Renata out of the ward in handcuffs, Ariel already knew everything. She just had nowhere yet to put it. Ariel sat outside the surgical unit for 4 hours without moving. She had been told he was in surgery and the best doctors are doing their best. But neither of those facts gave her any real comfort, because she had been there. She had felt the weight of him go down. She had held his face and told him to stay with her. Please stay. She didn't know, sitting in that plastic chair, what they were to each other anymore. She didn't know how to hold the word sister in the same mind as everything she felt. She knew only that the man who had stepped in front of something intended for her was behind those doors, and that she was not equipped to live in a world where he did not come back out of them. He came out. He was pale and wired and careful about how he moved, and when he saw her face, he said her name quietly, and she pressed her forehead against his shoulder, and neither of them talked for a long time. I don't know whether to be grateful or furious with you. He turned his head slowly. Be both. I can take it. She was trying to kill me, Cairo. I know. Your mother. That was your mother's... I know. His voice was quiet, not defensive, just certain. And I'd do it again. She looked at him. Her jaw was tight and her eyes were full. You don't get to die in my place, she said. That is not something you get to decide. I already decided it. Cairo, Ariel. He shifted, winced slightly, found her hand under his. I was standing right there. I saw what was coming. And there was not a single version of that moment where I was going to let it reach you. He paused. Not one. She pressed her lips together, looked away, looked back. I'm glad you're alive, she said finally. I need you to know that I am so glad you're alive. Her voice broke on the last word. Just slightly. Just once. And I don't know what to do with the rest of it yet. You don't have to know yet. The room went quiet again. She kept his hand in both of hers, and he let her hold it, and neither of them tried to resolve what was sitting between them yet. It was Ariel who eventually broke the silence. I'll leave. Cairo looked at her. Think about it, she said. If I leave, quietly, I'm just a woman who moved on. You stay, you heal, and then nothing, Ariel. His voice was very flat. There is no and then if you're not in it. She looked at him for a long time, and then she said the thing that cost her everything to say. I love you enough to leave so that you don't have to spend the rest of your life watching me from a distance. That is not a life. That is a punishment. And you don't deserve it. He didn't argue, not because he agreed. He would never agree, but because he could see that she had already made this decision. Please, Ariel, let's talk about this properly when I'm much better, he pleaded. She nodded. She left before morning. One bag, a ticket she had booked from her phone, a city she had chosen for no reason except that no one who knew her name would think to look for her there. She did not say goodbye. She understood that if she said goodbye, she would not go. And she had decided to go. Cairo was still staring at the door when Dorian walked in. He had not seen her, his Ariel, and he was already dreading her absence. He knew she had left. That was the only reason she would leave his side. And the only thing keeping him was that he knew she was right. His father sat down and was quiet for a moment. And then he said, without careful positioning of words, I owe you the rest of the truth. Cairo looked at him. When I told you she was your sister, that was my understanding of it. Celine was her mother. I believe that made her your family. Dorian paused. Something shifted behind his eyes, something that had been locked there for a very long time. But Cairo, I've known since before you could walk that you are not my biological son. The room held the sentence. Your mother, before the marriage and during it, There were things I chose not to confront, because confronting them would have destroyed the little stability we had. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was raising you regardless, and that was what counted. He looked at his hands. But it matters now, because it changes everything. Cairo's jaw was tight. Why are you telling me this now? Because I watched you bleed for a woman you love, Dorian said, and his voice was lower now, stripped of everything except the plain, uncomplicated truth. Because I'm not willing to let you both walk away from each other because of a silence I was too cowardly to break years ago. He leaned forward. You share no blood. You are not siblings, not in any way that is real. What you feel for her is not wrong. And I am sorry, Cairo, for every day you spent believing otherwise. Cairo stared at his father, this man who had raised him at arm's length, who had given him everything measurable and withheld everything that mattered, who was sitting in a hospital chair at whatever hour of the night this was, telling the truth, for possibly the first time in either of their lives. Cairo pulled the IV from his arm before Dorian finished speaking. Which airport? He said. He knew his father would already know about her leaving. He didn't have shoes on when he got to the car. A nurse was calling after him from the entrance. His father was somewhere behind him, moving faster than a man his age should have to. Cairo heard none of it. He was already calculating what time her flight was scheduled, how much of that time was already gone. He called her. It rang out. He called again. Rang out. Again. Again. His hand was shaking, not from the wound, from something that had no physical location, but was somehow worse than the wound. He drove. He didn't know which terminal. He didn't know the gate. He knew only that Ariel moved with purpose and precision when she had made a decision. And she had made this one hours ago, which meant she was already close to gone. He called one more time, and this time, it connected. Then her voice, very controlled, in the way it got when she was holding herself together by discipline alone. Cairo, don't. Which terminal? This is the right thing to do. You know it is. You need to let me... Ariel. Which terminal? A pause. Long. He drove without direction, just motion, the desperate physics of a man who cannot be still. Then she said it. Quietly. Like she already knew, even as she said it, what it meant that she had. He drove like the world was ending, because in every way that counted, it was. He got there. He ran. This was not the graceful sprint of a film. This was a man in hospital socks with a blood-stained wound in his side and pure adrenaline where his judgment used to be, pushing through bodies and luggage trolleys and the indifferent machinery of an airport that did not know or care about any of this. He reached security, the barrier. He had no boarding pass, no way past it, and she was somewhere on the other side, and he did the only thing left to him. He called her name, loud enough that strangers turned to look, loud enough that it carried over the announcements and the noise and the general busy indifference of a terminal full of people going places. Ariel. Silence. He watched the board. Then, past the security line, past the thinning crowd moving toward gates, he saw her. She had stopped walking. She was standing with her back to him and her bag over one shoulder and her whole body very still. Slowly, she turned around. He was at the barrier, breathing hard, one hand pressed to his side. He looked like what he was, a man who had left a hospital bed without permission to chase someone through an airport in his socks. He was the least composed he had ever been in his life. And he stood there, across the security line, across the crowd and the distance, and the fluorescent light of a terminal that had suddenly become the most important place on earth. And he said it. "We are not siblings," his voice carried. People nearby had gone quiet. He didn't notice them. "We never were. My father told me everything. I am not his son, Ariel. There is no blood between us. There is nothing between us except what we chose. And I am choosing you, right now. In this airport, in these socks, I am choosing you." She didn't move. A long moment. Long enough that something at the edge of Cairo's composure began to fracture. Then Ariel Hayes dropped her bag. She walked back through the crowd, back toward the barrier, back toward him, back through everything she had already made her peace with leaving. And when she reached him, she put her hands on his face, and he put his arms around her, and they held on in the middle of the terminal, the way people hold on when they have come very close to losing something they cannot survive without. Around them, the airport moved, but neither of them noticed. There are things that take a long time to settle after something like this. Renata was charged. She did not fight it. There was nothing left in her to fight with. She had spent it all. Dorian Lennox did what he should have done years earlier. He acknowledged Ariel, publicly, formally, without condition. She did not take his name. She did not need to, but she accepted the truth of what she was to him. Cairo healed. It took the 3 weeks the doctors had prescribed, and several more beyond that, and Ariel was there for all of it. She didn't go anywhere. Neither did he. Months later, the three of them sat at a dinner table together, Dorian at the head of it, Cairo on one side, Ariel on the other, and shared a meal. Nobody was entirely sure what to call what they were. The words available didn't quite fit, but the food was warm and the table was set, and that, for now, was enough. Some things don't get a clean ending. Some things just get a beginning after everything.